All right, Raiders fans, today we're diving deep into the latest coaching rumors and updates that have been buzzing around the organization. And I promise you, this one is going to make you think because there's been a lot of smoke around a particular candidate. And when there's smoke in the NFL, you better believe there's fire. So let's get into it and break down what's happening behind the scenes with the Las Vegas Raiders. First up, let's talk about Joe Brady. You may have heard the news that the Raiders recently interviewed him for the head coaching job. Brady is the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, and the more I've been talking to people around the league, the more I'm starting to view him as someone who might be better suited as an offensive coordinator rather than the head coach. Here's why. The Bills have a head coaching vacancy, and if they aren't willing to hire him, that raises a big question for me. If your own team, led by the best quarterback in the league, Josh Allen, isn't willing to promote you, why should the Raiders take that leap? Now, don't get me wrong, I've heard great things about Brady from people inside the Bills organization. He's been there a while, and Josh Allen has spoken positively about him. But when you look at the bigger picture, it's hard not to wonder why he's not getting the head coaching consideration for Buffalo. The Raiders need someone who can build a complete staff and lead a franchise that has been searching for stability for years. So while I wouldn't be opposed to Brady joining as an offensive coordinator, I'm not convinced he's the right fit as the head coach. And if you're going to roll the dice, I'd rather roll them on someone like Webb, who is already generating a lot of buzz. Speaking of buzz, let's move on to the next rumor. Over the weekend, Vincent Bonser mentioned something that hasn't really been reported by anyone else yet. And this is where you need to take everything from beat reporters with a grain of salt, because the reality is a lot of these reports are speculative and sometimes off base. But Bonser reported that the Raiders might show interest in Chris Shula, the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. Now, timing is everything in the NFL, and this is where things get interesting. The reason this caught my attention is because it comes right after the news that Brian Daboll would be interviewing with the Raiders. Daboll's name first surfaced in connection with Brian Flores as a potential offensive coordinator if Flores were to become the head coach. But as teams reached out to players and people inside other organizations, it became clear that Flores might not be the right fit. There were concerns about whether he could build the staff the Raiders desperately need. And the truth is, he burned a lot of bridges. So then Bonser drops the Shula name, and I start to wonder if there's a larger plan here. The Raiders were clearly interested in hiring a defensive-minded head coach, especially since Jesse Minter was reportedly their top target before he took the Ravens job. If you're already leaning defensive, then you have to think about who would be the offensive coordinator to complement that philosophy. Could the Raiders be thinking about hiring Shula as head coach and bringing in Brian Daboll as offensive coordinator? It's possible, but it's also complicated by the timing of interviews and league rules. Here's the thing. The NFL has strict rules about when teams can conduct interviews, especially with teams that fired their head coach later in the season. Only second interviews are allowed this week, which limits what teams can do. The Bills, for example, can't bring in candidates like Clint Kubiak because they're restricted by these rules. So the Raiders might have a slight advantage here, since they can move quicker. And then, right as we're talking about coaching searches, Jaguars offensive coordinator Grant Yudniski removes himself from consideration for the Browns job. That was a surprising move, because many thought he was a strong candidate to become the next head coach in Cleveland. It's a tough situation for Browns fans because the organization has struggled for a long time, and it seems like they keep making the same mistakes. I saw reports that they reached out to Tom Telesco for help with their coaching search, and that raises even more questions. Now, I'm not trying to trash Tom Telesco because he has experience and has been in the league for a long time. But the old saying, bad organizations stay bad, exists for a reason. If the Browns bring in someone who has had struggles in multiple organizations, it's hard to see how that changes the trajectory. And when you're talking about a team that has struggled to find stability at the quarterback position, you have to wonder why they'd bring in someone who hasn't shown success in that area. Now let's shift gears and talk about the name that a lot of Raiders fans are obsessed with, Clint Kubiak. If you've been following the coaching rumors, you know that Kubiak is a popular choice because of what he did with Sam Darnold and the Seahawks. People are pointing to his confidence in a young quarterback and his ability to design plays that get the ground game going and create explosive moments. And there's no doubt that he has a brilliant offensive mind. When you look at the game against the Rams, you saw what he can do. He got Kenneth Walker going early, and then he was able to open things up for Sam Darnold with play action. There were moments where it seemed like the Seahawks were just outsmarting the defense, with Darnold rolling out and finding open receivers like JSN. And that's the kind of creativity you want in a head coach, especially if you're going to be working with a young quarterback. But here's the reality. If you're thinking the Raiders are going to hire Kubiak right now, that's probably not going to happen. And here's why. According to PATRICK, Super Bowl week interviews are limited. A team can only interview a candidate if they've already held a previous interview with them. The Raiders interviewed Kubiak on Friday, January 9th, and that was his only interview that day. And the rule is that initial interviews must wait until February 9th. So if the Bills are interested in Kubiak, they have to wait until February 9th. And that's where the situation gets tricky for the Raiders. If they want to get the ball rolling, they may not want to wait. If Kubiak waits until February 9th and then chooses another destination, the Raiders could lose out. The Bills' job is one of the best in the league, and if Kubiak is considering it, it could be tough for the Raiders to compete. That said, I still think Kubiak's offense fits the Raiders' current roster very well. And I know that's probably me looking through Raiders-colored glasses, but it's something you have to consider. If the Raiders believe Kubiak is the best candidate, they need to be willing to wait and fight for him. But if they don't want to wait, they might need to look at other options. And that brings us to the big question. Do you want the Raiders to hire a head coach now, or do you want them to wait until after the Super Bowl to make a move? If you're waiting for Kubiak, you have to be patient. But if you're ready to get moving, you might need to act now and secure a coach who can start building the staff and preparing for next season. This is where things start to get interesting because the rumors around Webb have been heating up. According to reports, the Raiders are expected to meet with Broncos pass game coordinator Webb this week. And it's not just a casual meeting. This is his second interview with the Raiders, which is a big deal. When a team brings someone back for a second interview, it usually means they're serious about that candidate. And here's the part that's really going to make you think. I've heard from a source that one of the Raiders owners is flying into Las Vegas today in preparation for this interview. That's a big deal because when an owner gets involved in a coaching interview, it means the organization is taking it seriously. It means they're not just shopping around. They're considering making a real decision. Now, I'm not saying the Raiders are going to hire Webb today, but I'm saying that the level of attention and the timing suggests they are heavily considering him. Webb has a strong reputation for developing quarterbacks, and that's exactly what the Raiders need. With a new quarterback likely coming in, you need someone who can build a relationship, develop talent, and build a staff that supports that development. So when you think about all of this, the Brady interview, the Shula rumors, the Kubiak timing, and the Webb buzz, you start to realize the Raiders are in a pivotal moment. They have a huge opportunity to finally get this right. They have the number 1 overall pick, they have cap space, and they have draft capital. This is the moment to build a real foundation for the future. And that's why this week is so crucial. The decisions made now could define the direction of the franchise for years. Whether it's Webb, Kubiak, or someone else, the Raiders need to make the move that sets them up for long-term success. Because at this point, the fan base has waited long enough. The Raiders need to stop hesitating and start building a team that can compete consistently. Now, what happens next is going to be fascinating because the league is moving fast, and the Raiders have to decide if they're going to wait for their preferred candidate or if they're going to strike while the iron is hot. The next steps will tell us a lot about the organization's priorities and how serious they are about winning. Before I get into the part that can make you think, I want to circle back to what we've been seeing from the Raiders and why this coaching search feels different from past years. You've got to understand, for more than 2 decades, the Raiders have been chasing stability. They've been chasing a culture that can actually build something sustainable. And the frustrating part is that time and time again, the organization has had opportunities to get it right, and they've either rushed into decisions or hesitated at the worst possible times. That's why this moment feels so important. This is one of those rare windows where the Raiders can actually set themselves up for long-term success. Let's talk about the reality of the situation. The Raiders have a #1 overall pick, a ton of cap space, and a significant amount of draft capital. That's the kind of foundation you build a franchise on. But the foundation only matters if you have the right leadership in place. You can have all the tools in the world, but if you don't have the right person guiding the project, it all falls apart. That's why the head coaching decision is so critical. The coach is the architect. The coach is the person who sets the culture, builds the staff, and develops the quarterback. Now, here's where things get really interesting. There's been a lot of talk about Davis Webb, and I've been hearing more and more about how serious the Raiders are about him. It's not just a casual interest. This is a candidate that is being treated like a top option. And when you hear that an owner is flying into Las Vegas specifically in preparation for an interview, that tells you something. It tells you the organization is not just kicking tires. They are actively considering making a major decision. I know a lot of Raiders fans are skeptical about Webb. Some of you don't want to see a young coach who hasn't been a head coach before. You want someone with a proven track record. And I get that. The Raiders have had enough failures to make anyone cautious. But you have to consider what Webb brings to the table. He's a quarterback developer. He's worked with young quarterbacks and helped them grow. And in a year where the Raiders are likely going to have a rookie quarterback or a young signal caller, that kind of development is invaluable. One of the biggest criticisms of the Raiders in recent years has been the lack of quarterback development. The team has struggled to build a stable environment where a young quarterback can grow. And that's not just on the players. That's on the coaching staff, the system, and the overall culture. If the Raiders want to change that, they need a coach who is willing to commit to development and who understands how to build a system around a young quarterback. And that's where Webb fits. He's a coach who has been involved in building offensive systems, and he has a background that suggests he can relate to quarterbacks and help them grow. He's not the flashy option. He's not the headline-grabbing name. But sometimes the best decisions aren't the most exciting ones. Sometimes the best decisions are the ones that make sense for the long term. Now, I want to talk about something else that's been on my mind. The Raiders have been rumored to be interested in a defensive-minded head coach. That's been the narrative for a while, especially after they showed interest in Jesse Minter. The idea was that the Raiders wanted a defensive leader who could bring stability and structure to the team. And if you're hiring a defensive-minded head coach, you need an offensive coordinator who can complement that vision. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Your support helps us keep bringing you the latest updates on our Las Vegas Raiders. And don't be shy. Drop your thoughts on the news in the comments below. In what could be the most shocking move in NFL history, rumors are swirling that the Las Vegas Raiders have reached a groundbreaking agreement to acquire Patrick Mahomes. The speculation has sent shockwaves through the league, leaving fans and analysts alike struggling to process the implications of such a seismic shift in the football landscape. Mahomes, widely regarded as one of the greatest quarterbacks of his generation, has been the cornerstone of the Kansas City Chiefs' success for years, and the thought of him donning silver and black has ignited a firestorm of debate across social media and sports networks. According to sources close to the situation, the deal is said to be historic, potentially redefining the market for superstar quarterbacks. While financial details remain murky, insiders suggest that the Raiders may have offered a combination of draft picks, multiple players, and a lucrative long-term contract to lure Mahomes away from Kansas City. If true, this move could instantly catapult the Raiders into Super Bowl contention, transforming their offensive strategy and dramatically altering the competitive balance of the AFC. Fans are already imagining the possibilities. Mahomes leading a high-octane attack under the bright lights of Allegiant Stadium, pairing his unparalleled playmaking with the Raiders' storied roster. Analysts speculate that his mobility, arm strength, and leadership could mesh perfectly with the team's existing weapons, potentially creating one of the most dynamic offenses the league has ever seen. At the same time, the speculation raises countless questions about the Chiefs' next move, as losing a talent like Mahomes would require a complete rebuild of their offensive philosophy. While the NFL remains tight-lipped, the rumor alone has dominated headlines, with merchandise sales reportedly spiking and fan forums buzzing with excitement, skepticism, and disbelief. Whether this deal materializes or not, it has already ignited the imagination of the football world. One thing is certain. The mere possibility of Patrick Mahomes in a Raiders uniform has set the league ablaze, and every fan is now watching closely, wondering if history is truly about to be rewritten. That's it for this update. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay updated with exclusive news about our Las Vegas Raiders, be sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button. We can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next video.